so much for being here tonight. While we are in conversation, if you can keep yourselves on mute, there will be an opportunity at the end of the conversation to ask questions of our wonderful guests. Before I introduce them, I'm going to introduce our General and Artistic Director. Sorry, I'm just getting funny messages on my screen, but our General and Artistic Director, Nicole Paymont, to welcome us.
Hello, everyone, and so glad. Thank you all for joining us. What a privilege to see even people in Canada. My good friend André, I see, is there. It's wonderful to see everyone. I apologize for being such in the dark with my lighting, but I am there in bright light in my brain. And what a privilege, really, to, one of the things that's wonderful about contemporary opera is that we actually get to talk with the composers and the librettists and get their insights and be able to collaborate with them. So thank you. Not all composers and librettists are as generous as to say, sure, I'll talk with your community and share ideas. So thank you, Paul, and thank you, Mark, for joining us. For those of you that are new to us, this is part of our Bullhorn series, which is part of our community programs. And it sort of gives us the opportunity at OP to engage with our community and start some meaningful conversation that perhaps after that will spark other conversations in the next few weeks that will not be limited to this conversation now, and that will prepare you for our performance. And it also makes our opera projects bigger than just that weekend, but kind of a long process of having that time to meet the librettist, meet the composer, think about it, and then prepare ourselves for the final event, which is the production. And I hope you all join us for that in June. So without further delay, I will pass the baton to Danielle, who is our moderator today. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. So I should have introduced myself at the start. I always forget to do that, but my name is Daniel Harvey. I'm the Artistic and Community Manager at Opera Parallèle. This is the first of a series of events actually that we're putting under the series called Illuminating the Shining. And it's part of all of our community programming, which we call the Bullhorn. And it's ways, like Nicole said, for us to all sort of dig a little deeper into the subject matter and the stories that we're telling on stage. So today, as we know, we're very lucky to be joined by the two creators of the operatic adaptation of The Shining. We have Paul Moravec and Mark Campbell. So I'll give a quick little introduction before I throw over to them. Paul Moravec is a prolific composer and recipient of the 2004 Pulitzer Prize in Music. He's composed over 200 orchestral, chamber, lyric, choral, and operatic works, including The Letter, The King's Man, Sanctuary Road, and All Shall Rise, which were also both written with Mark Campbell, and of course, The Shining. He's also a university professor at Adelphi University and served as artist in residence at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, as well as composer in residence at the American Academy in Rome. Mark Campbell's works are among the most successful in the contemporary canon, spanning opera, musical theatre, and oratorio. His works, to name just a few, include Silent Night, for which he also won a Pulitzer, The Revolution of Steve Jobs, which he won a Grammy, As One, which is one of the most performed contemporary American operas with close to 60 productions to date, and as well Today It Rains, which was commissioned by Opera Parallèle. In recent years, he created and funded the Campbell Opera Librettist Prize with Opera America, and co-created with Kimberly Reed and Laura Kaminsky, his regular collaborators from As One and Today It Rains. They created the True Voice Award for transgender singers with the Washington National Opera. So please join me in welcoming our wonderful, esteemed panelists today. So to quickly introduce the project and this piece, we're going to be talking about, of course, The Shining today. So based on the 1977 novel by Stephen King, the operatic adaptation of The Shining was commissioned by and premiered at the Minnesota Opera in 2016, where it sold out before it even opened, which, as we know, in contemporary opera, never happens. It has since enjoyed sellout houses in Colorado and Kansas City, and Opera Parallèle is very proud to create the second production of this contemporary masterpiece in a new co-production with the Hawaii Opera Theatre and Portland Opera. So I'm going to throw the first question to both of you, actually, because I want to hear both sides of this story. Tell us a little bit about how this project came about. And was there any sort of direct connections back to Mr. King himself? Or yeah, how did it all happen?
Mark, should I begin?
Yeah, of course, because it started with you.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. This project began in '09, actually, when I had an opera called The Letter at Santa Fe Opera. It was my first opera. Dale Johnson was in the audience from Minnesota Opera, and he determined that he wanted to commission me for an opera. We went through a number of ideas and options, including Rosemary's Baby, of all things, which we could not get the rights for. I still think it's a great idea if we can get the rights, but in any event. And then one day he sent me an email and he said, how about The Shining? And that was an idea from Eric Simonson, who and directed the premiere and has directed actually all 3 iterations so far. And I thought, wow, what an idea. And then so then we got going on commissioning it. But first I had to get the rights from Stephen King. So through a mutual friend named Peter Straub, our dearly, the late, great Peter Straub, who just died recently, I got in touch with Mr. King and I sent him a proposal from with a budget, et cetera, from Minnesota Opera, so he could see it was real. And I thought, well, I'll never hear back. And he wrote back 20 minutes later and said, good idea, call my assistant in the morning, we'll get going on this. So eventually we got all the rights lined up with Warner Brothers and the Kubrick estate, and everything fell into place. And as we were doing that, Dale recommended Mark Campbell to be the librettist. We met, we'd known each other before, but we met and talked about it and we agreed, yes, this is a good idea. And that's how we got going on this. So so Mark got involved about 2013, I guess, right?
I think so. That seems so long ago, but I think you're right. Yeah.
It was 10 years ago.
It took, I have to really credit Paul with pursuing the rights to this project. Because it was really getting stalled for a while. In fact, I was calling it The Signing instead of The Shining, because it was turning into its own kind of horror story, trying to get the rights.
It's not that bad. No, it wasn't that bad.
It was originally, but now everything is secure. And I really think that Paul slipping a note under Peter Straub's door, because they were neighbors, really made this happen. So, you know, it took a while, but then once it started, it started.
Yeah, we got going on it.
Wow, amazing. It just shows it takes those little connections to you never know what they'll spark, but I love that. So I'm going to throw this one to you first, Mark, but I would love to hear your input as well on this, Paul. Why does this story make good opera?
Oh, come on, it has everything. Unfortunately, I think most people look at this Shining and they think of the Stanley Kubrick movie. And I love the Stanley Kubrick movie. I really do. I'm a huge fan of Kubrick's movie, especially Barry Lyndon, which no one is a fan of. But I love his movies, but it's not the story. And when you read the novel, there are so many elements that are just classic opera. Starting with the main character of Jack Torrance, who is really trying to be a good man. You don't know that from the movie. When you see Jack Nicholson in the movie, you're going, okay, he's going to murder his family. And there's no opera there. There's no story there. But when you read the novel, it is just a classic story for opera. And it has this other, you know, element of it, of paranormal events and everything. The thing that was difficult for me was taking this 600-page novel and finding the events that are essential and making sure that I keep my libretto as narrow as possible, as short as possible, so that Paul could expand it with his brilliant music. But it's kind of it's funny because when I would tell people that I'm doing an operatic adaptation of The Shining, they would laugh and they would start doing imitations of Jack Nicholson, and I'd say, well, it's really not that. And I suggest you read the novel because Stephen King is a brilliant storyteller and one that is perfect for operatic adaptation.
Absolutely. Paul, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, it's about extreme emotion as well. It's about love, death, and power, and on steroids. The big question for the creators of an opera is, why are these people singing? Because it's essentially an irrational art form. And it's because of overpowering emotions that give rise to song. And this story has that on steroids. Stephen King's story does, the original story does. Also, opera is about archetypes. It's about retelling, reimagining ancient stories deep in our collective unconscious, one might say. One of the archetypes, in my view, that he's dealing with is he's reimagining the story of Abraham and Isaac. The story of Abraham and Isaac, as you know, is Abraham is being told by a supernatural power to sacrifice his son, which is what's happening in The Shining as well. It's the manager, it's the hotel, it's the ghosts, and so on. And he is in their employ. He wants to keep his job and so on. So this is a true dilemma. I mean, what could be more of a dilemma than this? But the way that Stephen King reimagines it is that Jack Torrance realizes that he has to sacrifice himself to save Danny and Wendy, as opposed to an angel flying down from heaven, and staying his hand and so on. Also, there are other sort of tropes going on here as well. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because Jack knows, or he comes to realize what's happening to him. He knows that he's basically a decent guy trying to do the right thing. He has this dilemma. What do I do? I mean, there are two right things to do, so to speak. Also, there's the Mask of the Red Death, which is where all the ghosts come out in this endless party going on forever in this hotel. Also, there's a little bit of Huckleberry Finn in the relationship between Dick Halloran and Danny, little Danny, especially the final scene, which takes place on a dock, on a lake where they're fishing. So there are all these things going on that enrich the story. It's a very rich story. I echo what Mark said. Mr. King is just an amazing storyteller, which is, explains why he's so popular, I guess.
I think it's also important to realize that opera is the best form for conveying this story, because music is an abstract art form. Yeah. And it's very difficult to convey mental instability, right, violence, all of the things that The Shining is known for with words alone.
Right.
The movie succeeded because it went in a completely different direction from the book. I think the opera succeeds because it takes the novel further, because of the addition of music. And this is what we look for in opera. This is what we look for in music.
Right. We go deep into the characters and the emotions and the thoughts of the characters. And it's the orchestra and the voices and the music and the words, the fabulous words, of course, that convey all this directly into the central nervous systems of the audience.
Absolutely. And I think, as you say, that is really the key to the success of any opera, but particularly this one, that the music does half the storytelling, and that as it should in any good opera. And that's that's why we're so excited to be doing this. So Mark, this story, as we know, has many famous tellings, from, of course, the King's original novel, Kubrick's famous film, and now the Campbell libretto. So you talked a little bit about this, but take us a little more into where you start when you adapting such a well-known story, and how you find the voice of these famous characters that have been given such famous voices already through the movie adaptation, and how you put your own spin on that.
Well, first of all, you negate the voices that you've heard in the movie. You just shut them out, and you read the book and you read it in your kind of your own private relationship that you have with any work of art. And there was also an adaptation that Stephen King did himself for television. He was upset about how about the movie, and he did his own television adaptation. Ah, there it is.
All the props today.
It's not successful, but it's truer to the story that he wanted. I don't know. I mean, Daniel, if I were able to like put this in a book, well, I wouldn't be rich. I'd be like able to pay my rent, maybe. I have no idea how that spark of adaptation happens, where you look at the work and you realize that it's going to be sung, and so you let the little gold pieces come forward and shimmer, and you read a certain line, and there are lines in the libretto that are direct quotes from the novel, that you read them and you go, okay, that sings. I know that has to be there. I wish I could really put into concrete words or a concrete mausoleum. I don't know, just like how you adapt, but it basically comes down to, does it sing? Does it sing? I'm. It's such a dopey thing to say that, but that's basically it.
Yeah. Can you think of any of those lines that you remember from the novel? I don't want to put you on the spot for it, but that are directly in the libretto?
Yes, actually, because I noticed this in Kansas City, and I think it's very significant now. When it opened in Minnesota Opera, I thought nothing of the line when Halloran is in the kitchen with Wendy, and he says, we've got 12 loaves of black bread, 12 loaves of white bread for, however you're going to be here. And he says, we like to maintain a racial balance. And that's a really interesting line coming from, I think, 1975 when Stephen King wrote it. It's even more interesting now. And also a little bit fraught. Like it has, and I just remember thinking, I need to have that, because I wanted to make sure the audience knew that Halloran can have a sense of humor and that he's a beautiful man, and like right off. You just make these choices where
Mark, it also gets a laugh.
Yeah, of course, which is, I'm not opposed to laughs, but
that's great.
Whether they're earned or not. But it also establishes a relationship between Halloran and the audience, which is crucial at that moment. So you look for those lines, because you don't have that much time in a libretto. You look for those lines that just sort of shine and speak, that will make the audience connect with the character.
Right.
And there are other lines of Jack's. I can't think of them now, but the line, they have to be corrected. That is not in the screenplay, I believe. And I have no idea, because I never read the screenplay, and legally I would never admit to reading the screenplay. But that struck me, that's in the novel, and that struck me as so odd and so ugly and so frightening that had to make it into the libretto.
Who's he referring to when he says they have to?
That comes from Delbert Grady.
Yeah.
Right.
His daughters had to be corrected. That's why he killed them. And it's in the movie, actually.
It is in the movie. I don't remember, but he says, my daughters had to be corrected, and my wife had to be corrected too. And it's like, wow, it just sounded right. It just sang to me. That's all.
Yeah.
It's totally creepy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Another way of saying that it sings to you was totally creepy.
So Paul, how about you? When you were sort of starting to develop ideas for this project, how did the sound of The Shining, both like the opera in general and the supernatural sort of force and Danny's sort of power, how did you sort of come to create those sounds?
Well, well, first of all, I didn't want to get into horror movie, like, theremins and things, no. that was just, so what I did was simply to write the most beautiful score that I could, because I think of this as a beautiful nightmare. And so that's what I tried to do, just to write the most ravishing music that I could, and also using leitmotifs to tell the stories of the characters, and you follow the progress of the characters through the transformations of the leitmotifs, themes, the sounds, the harmonies, etc., that are associated with them up front. And that works sort of unconsciously on the audience. They're not even aware of what's going on, but the composer is using those transformations to show the transformations of the characters and their progress as they go along. And there's a special effect for Danny. Danny's a 5-year-old kid, and so I decided to make this a speaking role because how many 5-year-old opera singers are there out there, So, but when he has The Shining, and when he's, red rum, and all that, when he's freaking out, when he's channeling The Shining, the chorus sings through him. It's this really scary supernatural effect that I think works very well, if I do say so. So, there are special effects. There are ways to do this. Also, one thing that I do with the large orchestra is I have a big trombone section. There are 4 trombones, and so when you want to make people jump out of their seats, you just go, wah, when something really scary happens. With this reduced orchestration, we need to do it in another way, and you'll see how we do this. But
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I love that Paul said that this has to do with beauty. You have to find beauty in every story. Right. And it might be a beauty that takes a certain ugliness and is terrifying, but there's no reason to tell a story if you're not going to convey something that's ultimately beautiful and even hopeful. Like The Shining does end on a hopeful note. It's earned. Yeah. And I sort of find it odd that we call this a horror opera, because I just think it's a story about a family trying to survive really impossible situation, and a man who is losing his mind, a father who loves his family and is trying to survive and trying to protect them. That is what this story is about. The other stuff would be nothing. There would be no depth to the story, and that depth comes through Paul's music. It ain't in the libretto. It's in the music, and that's as it should be. That's why it's an opera, not a play.
Absolutely. I do want to pick up on what you were saying a little bit there, Paul, about this new orchestration that the Opera Parallèle is premiering. Could you tell us a little bit about how you went about that process of, I think the original had 60 plus orchestra, and now we're performing it with, I think, 21, 22. So yeah, what is that process like for you as a composer, and how do you maintain the depth of what you had written in the original into this version?
Well, there's an advantage to this smaller scale production. That is that it's more intimate. It's right in the face of the audience, which you can't do on a huge stage, with this, where everybody's about a foot, 100 yards away from the characters. So what I did was to use that intimate aspect to it and think of this really as a chamber orchestra, truly a chamber orchestra. I've written a lot of chamber music. So the challenge for me, which I hope that I've achieved here, is to make a small orchestra sound much larger than it really is. That's what a real orchestrator can do, or should do, I should say. So
yeah, and I mean, I don't know the detail of the score, of course, as well as you or as Nicole, who's conducting it. But I know that she's been every time she comes into the office after studying the score, she says how good this is, how excited she is about conducting it, and about how much of the storytelling comes through just in the orchestration. And yeah, it's going to be a real treat to hear it at YBCA for sure. So what was I'm going to throw this to you, Mark. What was important for you to bring to the forefront? And maybe you sort of answered this a little bit, but feel free to elaborate. What did you want to bring to the forefront in this story? And And also, what did you want to avoid when telling The Shining on stage? I think you're muted, Mark. Sorry.
No, because it was important for me to make sure that I was true to Stephen King's story. And the heart, no one ever puts heart with Stephen King, but there was a tremendous amount of heart in his work. He wouldn't be enduring the way he is if there wasn't heart. So to find the heart in the story and put that forward, like I mentioned before, this is the story of a man who is trying to be a good father. Now, you can put this through the filter, as everyone uses that word, of patriarchy, if you need to. That's fine. You can also look at the story. This was a very important element of the novel, is that we learn in the novel that Jack Torrance himself was abused as a child by his father.
Yeah.
When I read that, that was a revelation, because you do not see that in the movie. And I was just like, okay, that has to be a key character in this, so that the audience understands that there is a motive, or that there is a root to his problem, that it is something that he has to overcome, that manifests itself in alcohol, or did manifest itself in alcohol, and then we'll come back. But it's all in the novel. Like, it's all very, very clear in the novel. And once I was able to figure out a way to introduce Mark Torrance into the story, and then also add him in Act 2, it all just, I don't know, it just became very, I understood it. There was a certain point where I was just like, okay, I'm going to be, completely, I'm going to adhere to Stephen King's story and everything like that. And then when you adapt something, you run into a certain point where you go, okay, well, I'm adapting this and I'm being true to the story, but what is this story really about? And there was a certain point in this libretto where I said to myself, I need to find this message. And when I tell you this message, it's the most ridiculous, stupid, simplistic message you will ever hear, but that's always what great opera is based on. And that is that to end generations of child abuse, only a powerful love will end generations of child abuse. And that's what this opera is about.
And that's
once I was able to get to that, that made me sail through the rest of the libretto. Mm-hmm. Don't you agree, Paul?
Absolutely. And Danny does it. It's Danny's love. It's Danny's power. It's the good part of The Shining for Danny. This is the pivotal scene in the whole opera, which, by the way, we make a much bigger deal out of than Stephen King does in the book. In the book, this happens like in one page, but we make it the pivotal part of the second act, where Danny says, "No, you are not my father. The hotel is making you do this," and Jack has this epiphany. He says, "Oh my God," and Danny says, "Remember how much your father loves you. Remember that, Danny. You told me that." And that's when Jack says, "Run, get away from me." By the way, there's another aspect to this story, which is operatic. It's Götterdämmerung, because the hotel blows up at the end, and this fiery end. Also, getting back to what Mark was saying about Jack Torrance's relationship with his father, Mark Torrance, just before he allows the hotel to blow up, Jack grabs Mark Torrance's, his father's cane, and breaks it. So it's Siegfried shattering Wotan's staff, essentially, and then Götterdämmerung. So what could be more operatic than that?
Absolutely. It was definitely one of the things that really jumped out at me once we sort of started really diving into this story, that it is up to the younger generation to break the cycle, and I think that's such a powerful message today, particularly, you know, with the younger generations, of how the sort of millennial sort of and Gen Z sort of approach to having to, you know, fix the world that they've inherited, and I think that's something that any generation really can relate to on any level. So, you know, that really speaks to the universality of this story, and I love that that has really come out in this telling of The Shining, and yeah, I'm excited to bring that, or to see that even more on stage. So Paul, this one will be for you. The opera has enjoyed sellout houses around the country, everywhere it's been, even selling out before it even opened, before it was even ever seen anywhere in Minnesota. What do you get excited about now when you go see this opera? And you know, what do you think it is that gets people excited?
I get excited by just seeing a great story, you know, and I sit back, I want to enjoy it. You know, I don't write for myself as a composer. I write for myself as a member of the audience.
Mm.
I want to write something where I imagine myself sitting in the seat and I said, okay, I'm here, I've hired a babysitter or whatever. I've gone through all this rigmarole to show up. I paid the money. Amaze me, astound me. That's what I try to do. That's what I try to do for the audience, because I'm doing that for myself. I want to be amazed.
I love that. Yeah. How about you, Mark?
Well, of course I have to echo that. I write for the audience. I care about the audience. I don't understand why people don't write for an audience. Opera, why they don't write, you know, why you would choose to alienate an audience is beyond me. What I love about going to see each new iteration of The Shining is the joy I hear in Paul's. The music is so incredible, and every time I listen to it, I hear something different. Mm. And Kansas City we just had a production in Kansas City, and it was sort of like, oh my God, this is so crazy and wonderful. And I'm not a musician and I'm not a composer, and so I don't always hear like, oh, you inverted that melody, or that's the melody that you were doing in scene 1, but now it's in 3/4 or whatever. I don't have the technical expertise to understand that. I do have the emotional expertise to hear it. And every time I hear this score, it fucking freaks me out. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but it really does. Like, I can say in Minnesota Opera, I did not know that Paul's music would achieve this power. I knew that he was a brilliant man and a great composer, but you never know how a composer connects with the story. And it's an overwhelming experience. Yeah, sorry, I got emotional. You know how I am. It's that way for me.
It's great. I mean, that's what good music should do.
It absolutely should do. I mean, there's no reason for opera if it doesn't do that. Mm. There's no reason for opera if you're not reaching into the heart, and maybe in this case, twisting it around and, you know, doing scary things. Why write opera if it's not doing that? Why should opera be an intellectual exercise? That's bullshit. That kills opera for me.
Absolutely.
There's no reason to have music and theater combined if it's not for an emotional reason. All right, I'm off my high horse. Sorry.
All good. All good. So we've been getting, you know, different reactions to it when we announced that we were doing this production, and I'm sure you've experienced this in other places when there's either the people who are super excited about it, that they love Stephen King, they love horror, they love all of it, and they can't wait to get there. And then there's a lot of opera people, people who usually come and see anything, but are scared of seeing this piece because they think they're going to be really scared. Is it really that scary?
I just want to tell the audience out there that there is only one death in this opera, and it happens to be a suicide. That's it. And,
yeah, Tosca is more violent than
exactly.
It's like there's more. The body count is higher. you know, we have the advantage of having all these ghosts. They're already dead, you know.
Everyone's dead before the opera starts. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. A long time ago. Long time.
I have no idea if this production is going to emphasize the gore, but there is actually not that much gore in this opera in that way.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead.
no, I think there is suspense. I do believe that if people love Hitchcock, they will like The Shining. If they like not John Carpenter, if they like the more violent, like slasher films, they're not going to like The Shining. No. We don't do that.
No, Mr. King transcends the horror genre.
Absolutely.
At least in this. This isn't really what people think of as horror, in my view, or it's certainly not what I think of as horror. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure a lot of that comes from Mr. Kubrick's interpretation of it, which does lean into that sort of gore and horror a little more. But I think something I've sort of come to realize more about Stephen King, and that definitely translates into the libretto and the opera in general, is that the reason we find it scary, or one of the reasons, is that these characters are so relatable and well drawn and human, and that's we see ourselves in them as humans, and that makes it even scarier because it could be us, you know.
Exactly. Nothing is more frightening than the human heart.
Right.
Nothing.
And the audience is thinking, there but for the grace of God go I. That I could be Jack Torrance. This could happen to me. And they're right.
Yeah.
They're absolutely right.
And that's something else I've sort of learned in doing research about this, is that there's a lot of Stephen King's own life in this story of The Shining, of Jack in particular. That he was he's a writer who moved his family to a remote part of Colorado. Stephen King did the same thing. There was alcoholism, that generational trauma, all of that. A lot of it came from his own experiences, which is probably also why it is so well drawn out in the novel.
Paul, tell that story about Wendy and like screaming her name and everything.
Oh, you mean? Oh yeah, my wife happens to be named Wendy, like Wendy Torrance. So here come the police. So when I'm actually at this piano right here. So when I'm singing, I'm writing, Jack's lines, and I'm singing his parts and so on. And I'm singing lines like, Wendy, I'm going to bash your effing brains in, and I'm playing the piano and, crashing around. And she walks in and goes, what's that, hon? Oh, nothing, just working, It's a little creepy. It's a little weird.
It's an unfortunate coincidence.
We also had this experience, just so you know, it's not all work. We have fun. I stayed at a hotel that had plastic keychains that said room 217.
No, don't tell the story. No,
okay, I won't tell it. Okay, I won't tell it.
We'll save that for the special.
Okay. Cool.
All right, I'll tell the story.
Okay, tell the story.
Okay, where was this, Mark? Where was this hotel?
It was some hotel. Oh no! There was a store on Christopher Street that sold keychains that said Overlook Hotel, room 217.
Right. And so Mark sent this to me from Mrs. Massey, who's the dead lady in the bathtub in room 217, right? And
it was just a note. I just said that I'm in the bathtub, the door is open.
And the hotel, is on there. And so it comes in an envelope, and Wendy, my wife, picks it up and she opens it. It's just going, what is going on? Actually, she kind of freaked out because I was still at work, and I come back from work, and she goes, I think we need to talk about something.
That was very bad of me. I'm sorry, but
Oh my! I completely forgot about that. What a disaster!
Sounds like the classic Mark Campbell move.
No, that was scary.
But also to just write, I'm in the room. I'm in the bathtub. The door is open.
Yeah.
Well, Daniel, you've done that before. You've done that. I'm just like, yeah.
All right, moving swiftly along. So I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to open it up to the audience, to our guests to ask a couple of questions as well. But I'd love to hear from both of you. What and this might be repeating a little bit as well, but what do you hope audiences take away from this opera when they come see it?
Have a great time.
Yeah. Enjoy the story and maybe learn something about how you view your own family. That would be it. I don't believe in this whole thing about opera, like, what lesson did you learn? I think if you were there and you felt something, then you've learned a lesson. You felt something. But this whole, forgive me, Opera America push to, make something relevant and have a message, or be political. It's political. It has a message. It's relevant. We wrote it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry for reducing the discussion we've had for the last 5 years into something stupid. So
my approach, or what I'd like to do, and I think Mark, I think you might agree, is to put the story out there, let the audience decide. Take away from it what you want. I'm not going to preach to you, which is boring and predictable, and it kills art. Just put it. It's like Shakespeare. Shakespeare is an amazing thing. He never tells you what to think. It's the most amazing thing. And even in his political stories, he never tells you.
Nor does Chekhov. Yeah.
He lets you decide.
Which is why they endure, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure this will too. Absolutely. So I'm going to throw it open to our audience. Feel free to either put your question in the chat and I can ask it for you, or you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask it directly to Paul or Mark.
Well, I have a question.
Please, Jeff.
I was very impressed the way Mark was talking about how phrases in the novel sang to him. And I think that's really important. And I was wondering how Paul, when he saw the libretto, did it sing to him? And did you have any time where something didn't sing because of the accents and you had to change words around to fit the accents?
Yeah, we do that all the time. There's a lot of back and forth, endless revision going back. And very often it comes down to whether it's a short vowel or a long vowel, or, for example, the word you sounds terrible when you sing it high, high in your range, things like that. So a lot of it comes down to little details like that. So I would send Mark a note saying, can you give me a different vowel sound here or a different word? So
that's Paul, that's so reductive. There were other moments where Paul, one of the greatest ways that you can show respect to a collaborator is simply by saying, I'm not feeling this. Okay, like, what's going on here? Like, I don't know if I can set this to music. And Paul did that a few times, and it was fantastic. He doesn't say, I think you should do this. He says, something's wrong here. I'm not feeling it. And then it's up to me to figure out, like, what's going on here? And why is this not feeling right? And I have to admit, in our collaboration, which is really one of the most prized collaborations I could ever have, I love when Paul says something like that, because I know, and chances are I probably already know that, but I feel like I've been caught in something I tried to cover up. And he knows when I'm singing, when I'm writing text from the heart. He knows when I'm telling the story. He knows when I'm trying to cover up a little dramaturgical thing that needs to be covered up. And it's one of the greatest collaborations. It's really amazing. Sorry.
And this is mutual, because I will send an idea. We communicate by email mostly, and I'll send Mark an idea that I think is a great idea, and he'll consider it, and then if he thinks it's a dumb idea, which it very often is, he will simply say so, but very intelligently explain why it's a stupid idea. And that's great because it saves time. And I think, yeah, you're right. What was I thinking? And then I go on to something else. So the great thing about a collaboration is that the collaborators are the sand in each other's oyster. In other words, yeah, I mean, you know, it's the irritant that makes you come up with the pearl eventually, you know, because otherwise you wouldn't make the pearl. It wouldn't happen at all.
That's absolutely true. And Paul is being ridiculous when he says he has dumb ideas. They're actually smart ideas, but they lead to something else.
And some of them are really dumb, actually.
I don't remember those, Paul.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. There's a question in the chat from David Meckler for Paul. Does the party of the ghosts in the opera give you a chance to work in dance/swing music into the vocabulary of the opera?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Big party scenes. Yeah. Which is important for this show because it's basically just three characters in an empty hotel. But what this does is it opens up the whole thing so it doesn't feel so claustrophobic, and to the audience, I should say, because of course it's claustrophobic to Wendy and Danny and so on. But yeah, no, I love party scenes, big party scenes, big.
Absolutely. Are there any particular like musical references in there that we should listen out for?
You mean in the dance, in the party scene? No, that's original music that it's leitmotify because all the ghosts have their own leitmotifs as well. So, great. But it's just my invention. So,
great. Anne, am I seeing you raising your hand there?
Yes, I have a question. I may be the only human around who has never seen the movie, nor had I read the book. And normally I like to study up on a new opera, attend all the lectures, know about the music. Would you suggest that I attend this opera first before reading the book or seeing the film if I can? Or not, if I should go as a virgin to this opera.
As much as I admire Kubrick's film, it's not what we're doing and it's not what Stephen King did. So I would say avoid the film for this purpose. See it at another time. But I recommend reading the book if you can. It's okay. A long book. But you have a month.
Yeah.
I want you to read the book, but you don't have to.
Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah, just come to it fresh.
And also, the libretto is far superior. I can send you a PDF of that.
Thank you. Well, of course, I've gotten a lot of hints about what I'm going to be seeing and what happens, but still, okay, thank you very much for your suggestions.
The one thing that I will say is that, and this goes back to what Daniel said earlier about people being scared of being scared. Being scared is a wonderful thing. Falling in love is a wonderful thing. Acknowledging death is a wonderful thing. That's part of life. So I think this opera succeeds because it embraces all of those things. And I don't know. I just don't see it as a Gothic horror story.
No, I think like you're absolutely right, Mark. The idea of recreational fear, something I've been sort of reading up a little bit more on. And it's sort of a topic that we'll cover in another sort of panel conversation that we're doing in a few weeks related to The Shining, but sort of diving into that idea of why people enjoy being scared and why it can be actually kind of good for you. There's a whole, of course it's in Denmark, but there's a whole lab and a place that researches this kind of thing and understanding the human reactions to these things and how it is actually can be beneficial in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
There's another question in the chat. I've got a few minutes left here, but from Lisa Hirsch. My partner asks, in the book, there's a repeating theme of death, reanimation, and transformation, starting with the wasp's nest in Danny's room. Does the libretto reflect this as well?
Okay, I love this question because the wasp's nest in the book is one of the most frightening things I've ever read. And just to give you just so everyone here understands the story, Jack goes on the roof. It's early in the season. It's probably still September. And he's fixing the roof and he finds a wasp's nest. And he brings it down and gives it to his son, Danny. And unfortunately, Jack does not know that that there are still eggs in a wasp nest. It's really terrifying. So there's this really scary scene in the book where Wendy and Jack are in another room, and Danny is in the room looking at his wasp nest, and he goes to sleep, and suddenly the room fills with baby wasps because the eggs have hatched. It's frightening. And also just so beautifully symbolic. It is not stage worthy. It will not work in an opera. And I really hated losing that scene. So let me see the rest of the question. Death, reanimation, and transformation. Well, the transformation, you're bringing up very Wagnerian ideas here, and those are expressed in the music. Death, I don't know about reanimation, if that's a Wagnerian, but death and transformation are Wagnerian ideas, and those are all in the music. Paul, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, where's the reanimation? I'm not sure where that is, but in any event, it's constant metamorphosis going on in the orchestra, and that's what's conveying. The orchestra is the action. The orchestra is the characters, and it's the morphing that goes on with the leitmotifs and constant turmoil in the orchestra. That's what tells this. That's what's driving the agenda of this whole thing. So in that sense, it is Wagnerian. It's Straussian. Yeah, Brian. There you go.
Yeah. Well, first off, I was saying thank you both so much for writing this beautiful piece. It has been a pleasure to delve into it. Mark, I want to personally thank you for having the father appear in the piece. I think it really actually helps us with the transformation, because if Jack doesn't go to the edge, he never would have broken the cycle of abuse, right? He would have lived within it. He needed the ghost actually to take him and push him to the very edge of that, to break that cycle. So that's one thing. And the last thing I wanted to say is, Anne, I haven't seen the movie either, and I didn't see it on purpose for that reason. So I could just do it with the book in my mind and the beautiful piece that they made. So steer clear of that.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to wrap it up there. I will give a quick little plug out, as Ruth has put in the chat here, for the Enhance Your Experience page, which is on our website. This is something we do for all of our productions, curate a bunch of resources, videos, books, readings, that sort of surround the subject matter of each opera. So there's lots of things to dive into there around The Shining. That is the page where this conversation will end up, as well as content from our upcoming panel conversation on May 18, which, if you're in San Francisco, will be at the Academy on Market Street on the 18th of May at 6:30 p.m. We have a great panel, including our lead soprano, Kirsten Piper Brown, who'll be playing Wendy, Katie Hafner, the author, and an amazing stage director / neuroscientist named Indra Viscontis, and I'll be moderating that panel as well at the Academy. And of course, Opera Parallel performs The Shining at the Blue Shield of California Theatre at YBCA on June 2nd to 4th this year. Tickets start at $40 and are available via operaparallel.org/The Shining. So we hope to see you all at one of those things, and if not at the panel, definitely at the show in June. And we can't wait. So thank you so much, Paul and Mark. Thanks for joining us, and yeah, we'll see you all soon.
Thank you all.